Hans von Spakovsky joins us right now, senior legal fellow at the Heritage Foundation, a friend of our show. Hans, welcome back. It's good to have you here. Another indictment, another day.
Yeah, and look, I thought the federal indictment was a spurious indictment in which the federal special counsel was stretching laws to cover perfectly legal activity. This state prosecution, county prosecution, really, Atlanta, is even worse. I just couldn't believe the things I was reading when I read through the 100-page indictment. And for your listeners, I did it so they wouldn't have to.
Yeah, that's good. So what are your takeaways from the specificity of this indictment? Because it is a lot of pages. It's also a lot of people.
It is. 18 co-defendants, many of them lawyers who are being criminally indicted for doing what lawyers, actually under the professional rules of conduct, are supposed to do, which is vigorously represent their clients. And for that, they're being criminally prosecuted. Look, what this case claims is that Donald Trump basically was Tony Soprano, and that he violated the state RICO law. That stands for Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. That's a law that's used to go after mob operations, dangerous drug cartels, and it is outrageous that this local prosecutor is trying to use it to go after the former president of the United States and all of these lawyers who were doing work for him. The whole problem with it is that if you read the indictment, she goes through and she lists all these acts that she claims were illegal acts in furtherance of this criminal conspiracy. And the things she lists are all protected by the First Amendment. I mean, the very first act she lists is a nationally televised speech that Donald Trump gave in which he basically said, hey, I actually won the 2020 election. She lists tweets sent out by Trump, like one of them, if you could believe this, a supposedly illegal act was him tweeting out saying, hey, I'm watching the televised coverage of the public hearings of the Georgia legislature when they were taking a look at what had happened in the election. Amazing. That's his entire tweet. And telling people he was watching public hearings was an illegal act, according to Fani Willis. That is how nutty this entire thing is. And look, it's not just the First Amendment, free speech, that protects what Donald Trump did. It's the other part of the First Amendment. You know, one of the most overlooked provisions of the First Amendment is the one that says all citizens have a right to petition the government for redress of grievances. What that means is you have a right to talk to government officials, to complain to government officials, to try to ask and persuade them to take action. And yet she says, Fani Willis, that all the actions taken by Donald Trump and, again, his allies to try to persuade state legislators and others to investigate the 2020 election, to declare that it was stolen. She says that's all illegal. Well, it's not. It's all protected by the First Amendment. And the key thing for people to keep in mind is, look, it doesn't matter if the claims that Donald Trump were making were true or not. It doesn't matter. I have a right to stand up and say anything I want to about the 2020 election, even if what I'm saying is totally wrong. That is not a criminal violation of the law.
Hans, even if you know it to be wrong, is it still your right to speak it?
Yes. Yeah, it is. I mean, look, if knowing that what you were saying was wrong was a crime, then probably almost every single member of Congress would be in federal prison, okay? Yeah. I mean, you have a right to speak, and whether you're proven wrong later, it just doesn't matter.
I want to ask you, Hans, about this is deep election stuff, and you've written a book about our election system, and I encourage people to check it out. it's called Our Broken Elections. But we've talked about electors, slates of electors. Some people call them fake electors. Some people, try to key in on that as the epicenter of how Donald Trump was calculating to steal the election. Can you explain to me very basically, what are they talking about when we're speaking of slates of electors, fake electors, and what the Donald Trump role is in this so that people understand the discussion that's happening out there in the media a little bit better?
Well, remember, we have an electoral college system. So when you go in to vote on election day, even though you're voting for one presidential candidate or the other, what you're actually voting for is a slate of electors, individuals who have pledged that they will vote for either candidate. And what Donald Trump did and what he's accused of having done illegally is in a number of states, they set up and asked people to be a set of contingent electors. And the idea was, when they were talking to state legislators, was saying to them, look, if you all decide the election was stolen in your state, and if you certify me, Donald Trump, as the winner, here is an alternative slate of electors, Trump electors, whose votes you can certify. That didn't happen. No state decided to, change the results. None of these alternative slates of electors were certified or sent to Congress. So again,
was it criminal for Trump to create those alternative slates?
No, it wasn't. And I'll tell you I'll give you one very specific example of just how outrageous this is. Look, one of the people named as a co-defendant is a guy named David Schaefer. I know David. He used to be a state senator in Georgia, and he was the head of the Georgia GOP in 2020, and he helped set up a slate of alternative electors. Well, under state law, who do you think is given the power under Georgia state law to name the individuals who will be the electors?
Who's that?
It's the state chairs of each political party. So he's being criminally prosecuted for doing something that he was entitled to do under state law.
So, I mean, the narrative around the electors, the slates of electors, implies that Donald Trump was manifesting something incredibly devious to, in the middle of the night, try to steal this election from the specific states and then ultimately the American people as a whole. How do we get from what you just said to where the American people are being influenced with this idea, this devious idea of Donald Trump's? Did he create this idea? Is he the first one to try this?
No. In fact, in 1960, a slate of electors from Hawaii, they were Kennedy electors, ended up getting sent to Congress and counted instead of the Nixon slate of electors who had been certified by the governor as the winners in the state. So it's not like this is the first time. In 2000, a member of Congress tried to persuade Al Gore to do exactly the same thing, to set up a contingent alternative slate of electors if the courts determined that he had won the election, so they'd be ready to go. That didn't happen, but the point is none of that is illegal. And look, if talking about an election being stolen was a criminal conspiracy, then why hasn't Fannie Willis, the DA, indicted Stacey Abrams? Stacey Abrams is the twice losing Democratic candidate for governor in Georgia, and she's been claiming that those elections were stolen from her for years.
Yeah, to this day. So she's never stepped off that. I have a comment here from a listener. We're speaking with Hans von Spakovsky, who is a senior legal fellow at the Heritage Foundation, a former DOJ lawyer and a former FEC commissioner. He says 91 felonies. Trump's going to be convicted on some of these for sure. You think he's right?
Well, yeah, and the reason for it has nothing to do with the facts or the law. Okay. The problem is that in all three of the indictments, the one in Manhattan, the federal one in the District of Columbia, and now this one in Fulton County, those are all overwhelmingly Democratic jurisdictions in which people just hate Donald Trump. And in Fulton County, for instance, Georgia, And I know that county very well because not only am I licensed to practice law in Georgia, but I used to be a county election official in Fulton County.
Mm.
It is an overwhelmingly Democratic jurisdiction, and I know Fannie Willis is counting on the fact that a jury will find Donald Trump and these defendants guilty because they're Republicans. It's regardless of what the facts of the law are in the case.
So if, to the 91 felonies, if he's going to be found guilty, Hans, what happens next?
Well, he's going to the key out to this will be the appeal. And I'll give you the best example of this. Look, Jack Smith, the special DOJ counsel who filed a federal indictment against Donald Trump, where he's stretching the law far outside of what it covers. This is the same lawyer who tried to do the same thing a decade ago against Robert McDonnell. Robert McDonnell was then the Republican governor of Virginia. Smith went after him for supposed corruption and tried to use this federal law against him, got convictions. McDonnell appealed it all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the U.S. Supreme Court ruled 9-0, unanimously, the liberals agreeing with the conservatives that Jack Smith had basically twisted federal law to cover something that it just wasn't covered, and they threw out the convictions. And I'm afraid that's going to be the same path that Donald Trump is probably going to have to take.
And if that is the path that this goes, we do have some, guilty convictions over this whole chapter book of indictments for the president. What is the timeline on that? And Hans, in your opinion, how does it affect Donald Trump's ability to run in an election, in a primary, in a general? And if that timeline extends past November of 2024, even January of 2025, his ability to be the president of the United States should he win?
Boy, I tell you, Fannie Willis, the Fulton County DA, went to court, I think yesterday, and asked for a March 6th trial date. That's a crazy date to expect when she not only indicted Donald Trump, but 18 co-defendants, and is trying to tell the court that they should all be tried at the same time. There is no way you could, by March 6th, complete all the prior work that has to be done to have a trial. So are these trials going to occur during primary season next year? Very well may be, but then I think that's actually the intent of all three of the prosecutors involved in these cases. One thing to keep in mind, conviction for a crime does not prevent you from being president.
Yeah. We were talking on the air yesterday about the fact that maybe we could make a deal with the left and say, we'll put him in jail, but he has to be president when he's in jail. Would this be the thing that brings everybody together? It just seems absurd. Last question before we go. We're speaking with Hans von Spakovsky right now, specific to the Georgia case. Correct me here where I'm wrong, because I'm sure I'm wrong all over the place. The first three indictments, if he became president of the United States, would he be able to pardon himself? The fourth indictment in Georgia seems like that might not be the case, should he be found guilty.
Well, my understanding of that provision of the U.S. Constitution is that the president's pardon power only extends to federal prosecutions and not state prosecutions. Some experts disagree with that, but I think that's the case.
Uncharted constitutional waters. What a time to be alive. Hans, we're so grateful that you're here to navigate it with us. Thank you for your time today.